So guys, last week I asked you for a bunch of questions regarding the PC release of Star Wars Hunters, and in today's video I'll be answering them in a bit of a Q&A style video. But before I do get into the questions, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with the notification bell turned on so that you don't miss out on any more Star Wars Hunters content. The first Steam playtest for the game releases in just a couple of days now, and before that I do have another video going over 5 major things that you can expect to see from that. But jumping into the questions now, Brilliant Bro over on Discord asked that if I think PC will make it more difficult for us as Switch players and mobile players because PC will run so much better. Now I think it really does depend. Obviously PC has the potential to go up to 300 frames per second, which is 10 times the amount of those on Switch and 5 times the maximum on mobile devices as well. So there is a serious advantage on that already, which is definitely concerning. And with people using mouse and keyboard inputs rather than controllers, at least with Gunman they will be a lot more accurate than those of us with a controller or using our fingers. So I think if you are match made into a game with PC players as a Switch or mobile player, you probably will struggle a lot more than you usually do. But it really also does depend on the player. Plenty of PC players will use controllers for this game. Others will obviously be using mouse and keyboard, but maybe they're not actually that great at games. So it really will just depend on the player. You'll have skill gaps at any time, no matter what input and the frame rate. But certainly PC players will have an advantage. Now the next question comes from Tom Gaming, and surprisingly it's not about Batman this time. And he asks, if the PC launch goes well, do you expect to see a console version? And if so, how long at a guess do you think it would take for the console launch? Now this is a good question about the PC release, honestly, because it obviously goes into early access release rather than full PC release at the end of January. Now the game will still be accessible for everyone over on PC, but it tends to be not a full launch because it means that they can make a bunch of changes based on player feedback and so on. A little bit like soft launch in a way, but it will be available in all countries with Steam rather than just a very specific amount. With the full PC release expected to release in mid-2025, so if that is all happening on time and it goes well and Star Wars Hunters has got years left on it, then I think a console release for PS5 and Xbox certainly will happen. However, I feel like it would probably not happen until either late 2025 or early to mid 2026, honestly. It could in all fairness be a lot faster given that the PC port for this game would probably run exactly the same on Xbox and PS5, given that the required specifications for PC are so insanely low. So maybe it wouldn't take a huge amount of time, but it would be time nonetheless. Now the next question comes from Turtle Tuxedo, asking whether or not it will be playable on Mac. I'm assuming no. Honestly, I'm not actually 100% sure. I'm really not familiar with Macs whatsoever. If Steam is accessible on Mac, then possibly, but other than that I don't actually know. I feel like Kaveri might have answered this question before on the official Discord server, and I feel like I've seen people talk about it, but unfortunately I don't actually know whether this will be playable on Mac. The playtest is in just a couple of days, so you will be able to find out if you can't get it on Steam, so at least we don't have to wait long to find out. Next question comes from Night Wizard on Discord, and that is, for PC, would there ever be a voice chat feature? Now I'm pretty sure there will be. For a long time now, voice chat functionality has been in the game files, so presumably that is all to do with the PC release of this game. Whether it's going to be there at launch, I don't actually know, but I imagine it will happen at some point, and presumably that will only be between PC players and not Switch and mobile, but I think it is definitely safe to assume that it will happen. Now the final Discord question comes from Brian the Brick, and he's asked, are you excited about the Sprocket rework? What are they going to change? Now as of me recording this on Friday the 6th of December, they haven't actually announced what the change is going to be. They might have showed it off briefly in the PC launch trailer, but I don't really think you can tell. I think he still works basically the same, but it could be 1 or 2 abilities get changed ever so slightly, or it could be quite a major thing. I don't really know what to expect. As for whether or not I'm excited, I'm honestly more apprehensive because I feel like he's absolutely fine right now and honestly the best support hunter for things like dynamic control and trophy chase, but maybe it's because his functionality isn't as good in situations like squad brawl and maybe scrap salvage and other things like that, so perhaps that's why they're changing him around a bit. I don't really know what to expect. Instead of maybe sending out a health drone for everyone, it might just be a case of you've got a drone to buff your teammates, nerf enemies, and maybe a drone that will actually just lock on someone and heal them for a bit. I don't really know. That could happen. But but we will ultimately just have to wait and see. There's also some questions over on YouTube as well, the first of which comes from Fraggin Bastich, asking, do you think the developers will start to favour PC players when it comes to optimization and gameplay? I think Nox is already a small step towards that. Do you? Honestly, I don't really know. I wouldn't have thought they would just favour PC players outright, given that Zynga themselves originally are a mobile gaming company. They're one of the biggest mobile gaming publishers in the world. In fact, they are. So I think things like mobile will always come as a bit of a priority for them, given that's where they're essentially from. The Switch release of the game is their very first console release, and also the PC release for this game is their very first step into PC. So Star Wars Hunters is a very important game for Zynga in many ways. I don't think they'll favour it, honestly, when it comes to optimization and gameplay, because, well, if you look at the requirements for PC, a literal 10-year-old GPU will actually run this game at a minimum specification, so you don't really have to do a crazy amount of optimization, really. If you optimize it for mobile, then you can easily go higher with PC, so I don't think there has to be a concern regarding that. Regarding Nox, though, being a small step towards favouring PC players, I think she certainly will be very good for PC players, 100%. But I don't think that necessarily means that that's Zynga favouring PC players, because I've been playing her on the Switch with a controller and she plays absolutely fine. I played a game on mobile with her as well using touch controls, and I did find it challenging, but it wasn't as difficult as I felt people had been saying. But in all fairness, that was not a ranked game, so it probably is a completely different story in that situation. So ultimately, to answer that question, no, I don't think they will favour PC players much. I just think they obviously want to bring it to PC, and obviously over there they can push the boundaries a lot further. Micah asks a really good question here, saying, do you think we will see an increased difficulty in reaching the upper tiers of ranked? It's been somewhat easy for me to reach Kaiborn up to this point, but I worry that PC players joining the mix will provide a disadvantage due to lower FPS for Switch and mobile players. Now, it is entirely possible that it could be a bit more difficult. We will obviously see a lot more player numbers coming into the game. Whether it's more difficult, I don't really know, to be honest. It's hard to say, because getting to Kyber 1 is really more about time. If you play the game enough, you will easily reach Kyber 1, I think. That's how it's been ultimately for me. I've not worked particularly hard. I've played games with decent players as well in my squads during streams, so it's been pretty easy to get there. So I think that's the most important thing. Just play with a team and you'll probably be absolutely fine. I think what actually might come from PC as well is that hopefully the matchmaking will be a bit better, so that the really high level players on Switch and mobile will actually then start playing with high level players on PC, so that if you aren't, within the top 100 currently, or even the top 2 to 300, then you might actually find that things might be a little bit easier here and there. But because that crossplay with PC, you could also be at a slight disadvantage. So yeah, with that sort of stuff, it's really hard to say. It could happen, it could not. We will just have to wait and see. Next question comes from Confused Viewer, saying, will you have to play with PC, or will you be able to opt out of that crossplay option? Currently, with the January release of this game, you will not be able to opt out of crossplay, so you will have to play with PC players. However, the community has asked this quite a lot already, and Kaviri has taken a note of it. I saw that comment myself a few weeks ago, so it has been noted, so that could all change. We will just have to wait and see. Then there's two questions to wrap things up from Alec DeLorean, asking, on PC will I use mouse and keyboard or with controller? Personally, I will probably just use controller, because that's just my preferred input. I will definitely give mouse and keyboard a go, but at the same time I will normally be streaming quite a lot as well, so I'd rather not do mouse and keyboard, and I personally just find a lot more enjoyment using a controller rather than mouse and keyboard. Sure, okay, that will put me at a slight disadvantage, because naturally it just will, but I'm honestly not that concerned. And finally, Alec asks a question of whether or not I'm worried about not having the option to enable/disable the cross-platform matchmaking. Personally, not massively, because I will be playing it on PC the vast majority of the time now, I would imagine, just because of that seriously high frame rate compared to Switch. So I'm not really worried about it, because regardless of whether or not I cared about it, I'd still be playing with PC, so it doesn't really impact me too much. As a whole though, I think it is a little bit of a concern, because a lot of people on mobile and Switch will feel at a disadvantage. They might struggle. There are a lot of concerns in the community already, which obviously is not a great thing, and it could turn people away from the game, which we absolutely don't want. I think there absolutely needs to be the option to do it, or at the very least do input-based matchmaking instead. So even if you're on PC but you're using controller, then maybe you just matchmake in that regard. hard. But of course, you could potentially run into the issue of people going into controller then changing to mouse and keyboard partway through, unless they were able to detect the input changes mid-game and essentially not allow that to happen. That would be good, but I don't really know how possible that is. But they are all of the questions, guys. Thank you very much for asking them. Hopefully you found this video useful. Like I said, there are other things to expect with PC, and I've got a video on that coming within the next day or two, so stay tuned for that. That is it from me today, though. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you always.